I know he damaged the country, and the Obama administration will deal with it.
But do you think it's possible for one man to really damage the security of the nation?
I think he damaged the security of the country.
All right. You know, any chance I get to hear the sound of George W. Bush's voice and play George W. Bush for you, I'm going to do it. So, in fact, that was him in Africa. And he was being interviewed about Snowden, and he said he was asked if Snowden was a traitor, and you heard the answer. Here's the next cut number 14.
Put the program in place to protect the country, and one of the certainties is civil liberties were guaranteed.
So you don't think there's a compromise between security and privacy?
I think there needs to be a balance, and I think, as the president explained, there's a proper balance.
Okay. Joining us now to talk about the saga of NSA leaker Edward Snowden is our friend, Doug McNabb, international attorney, senior principal at McNabb Associates. Hey, Douglas, how are you?
I am excellent, Steve. And you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to talk to you again. All right. Since the last time we spoke, which I guess was about a week ago or maybe a week and a day, apparently Snowden has gone to some 21 countries, and the list is dwindling. Are you surprised?
Well, not really, because many of the countries that are on that list are EU countries, and many of those provide that you have to be in the country to apply for asylum. As you mentioned, there are 21 in the international arena. We call country states. So if you hear me bounce back and forth, I'm talking about a country. But one of the 21 countries is Russia, and apparently President Putin yesterday said, "Hey, we'll give it to you on the condition that you shut down all of these disclosures." And subsequent to that, Mr. Snowden withdrew his application. But out of looking at the list of the 21 countries, and then on a country-by-country basis, some of these countries have said flat out, no, we're not going to give it to you. Some have said you got to be on our soil, so that may not happen. And so it's narrowed down really at this point to 9 countries, 2 of which are possibilities, because the presidents themselves have said that it's a possibility that they'd give him asylum, and that would be Bolivia and Venezuela. The other 7 countries, there's been no response at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I know we went. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
We just have to wait. Well, I'm sorry. So we just have to wait and see whether those 2 countries extend an offer to him, or any of the 7 that there hasn't been a response from yet.
So let me concentrate on Putin and Russia supposedly telling him, as you alluded to, Douglas, that you could have asylum here if you stop your leaking. Now, one part of me wants to say, who are they kidding? And the other part wants to say, well, you just said he told them no. So are we to believe that that was a legitimate offer, and that they would expect him to stop the leaking, or what? Except stop the leaking to them in private, but stop the public leaking? I mean, what do you think's going on? That's what I don't understand.
Well, if you don't understand, you're in good company. There are a lot of us who don't understand what's going on either. I think it was a way for President Putin to get out from underneath the problem. I mean, he said, look, I'm not going to extradite him to the U.S., although I still think that there's a chance of a swap, even though the U.S. president has said no and Russian president has said no. But they very much want Victor Bout, who was the alleged merchant of death, the arms dealer that was just convicted in Manhattan and given 20-something years, and he's a Russian. So absent a swap, I think Putin saw a chance to get out from underneath it and said, "Hey, we'll give you asylum. However, you got to stop the leaking." So basically, I've taken Russia off of the list. The 9 countries that are left, I've mentioned that 2 of them are possibilities. That's Bolivia and Venezuela. The other 7, China, Cuba, France, Germany, Netherlands, Nicaragua, Switzerland. Those are the 7. And of those, we have extradition treaties with Nicaragua. That's really the oldest treaty and went into force back in 1907. So it's an old one, like the treaties we have with Cuba, Venezuela, and Ecuador. I don't really see the EU countries that would be Ireland, France, Germany, agreeing to do it. I mean, well, we're doing is best guessing here, but
yeah,
I would guess probably the 2 possibilities. Haven't heard from Nicaragua, but that's the old extradition treaty. They're Latin America. Maybe they might do something there as well. But the question is, how is he going to get out of Moscow?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you that also. Either the countries that say you could come here and apply, or a country that might welcome him with asylum. He has no passport, no valid passport. So are the Russians going to let him go, or is he going to live perpetually for the foreseeable future on the off the tarmac in the airport outside of Moscow?
Yeah, at some point he's going to overstay his welcome, I would suspect. As you point out, his U.S. passport's been revoked, and he had a refugee travel document, which I think is what got him from Hong Kong to Moscow, and then the Ecuadorian president is saying, well, the consul who issued it didn't have the authority to do that. He'll be punished, whatever that means. And there seems to be a falling out, from what I've read, between Assange and the Ecuadorian president. So he doesn't have a travel document. So if a state like Bolivia or Venezuela wants to grant him political asylum, then they're going to have to issue a refugee travel document for him to travel. He's got to have a travel document to buy a ticket to get on a plane.
What is Bolivia? I'm sorry, go ahead.
If he doesn't have a travel document, and Russia says you need to leave, either voluntarily or involuntarily, you need to get out of here, what they can do is expel him, and they'd send him back to the country from which he came. That would be Hong Kong. So he disembarks in Hong Kong, and he's now in the country illegally. He had a visa earlier, but when he chose to leave, I suspect that visa has been canceled. So he disembarks from the plane onto Hong Kong soil. He's in the country illegally. It's going to be a timing issue. He's going to apply for asylum a lot quickly, but at the same time, is it possible that the Hong Kong police could arrest him and either place him in extradition proceedings between Hong Kong and the U.S., or since he's in the country illegally, they could just expel him?
Hey, you have any interest in writing a novel?
I would love to have somebody help me with that.
Because it sounds like you got all the ingredients. We're talking to Douglas McNabb, international attorney, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. What would he do in Bolivia or Nicaragua or Venezuela for the rest of his life?
Well, let me analogize it to Robert Velasco, who was indicted out of the U.S. for financial fraud. He hooked them to Costa Rica, secured Costa Rican citizenship, lived there quite happily, I'm told. And then Costa Rica, at the request of the U.S., reviewed his citizenship application, found that he lied, and so they were going to revoke his citizenship, and he left and went to Cuba. And he was given political asylum in Cuba, and from all reports was very happy, but he was also involved in the drug trade while he was there. Cuba charged him with drug trafficking, and I think he died in prison. So it depends upon, the country and the relations. And this is 10%, as I've said before, Steve, this is 10% legal and 90% political.
Right.
It's anyone's guess.
Well, let me ask you, you were the one who brought up during our last conversation about the possibility of Barack Obama capturing Snowden if he flew from Russia to, let's say, Cuba and came into our airspace. When the president said last week, I'm not going to scramble jets to go after a 28-year-old hacker, what did you think?
I think that the language he used was to try to make the political observation that it's just he's just a hacker. He didn't disclose that much information, but I don't think anyone bought that. Do I believe the president when he says if the plane goes over U.S. airspace, I'm not going to take him down? Half the Americans out there hearing that would probably say, yeah, they believe him, and half not. I'm doing what I do for a living. I'm kind of a skeptical kind of guy. I'd like to believe the president, but I certainly wouldn't want to take any chances with my client that something like that could possibly happen.
Right.
Again, we're just talking generally here.
I would have loved the president to have said, I mean, you want to call him a hacker to try to diffuse the situation or downplay it, that's fine. But I would have said, I'm not going to discuss our options, or all options are on the table, or some such answer. But to say I'm not going to do it, I'm afraid that because of the president's mouth that it came out of, he's not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah. All right. Now, so this, how long, Doug, do you think, we'll be sitting here, you and I, talking about where he's going to wind up?
I don't know of any. Of course, I'm not a Russian lawyer, but I don't know that it's been reported that there's any sort of a law or regulation that would prohibit somebody from staying in the transit zone in Moscow, forever, if you will. But I do think that at some point, particularly since Snowden has withdrawn his asylum application, I think at some point the president of Russia is going to grow tired of this. I guess since Mr. Snowden hasn't been seen, he's probably holed up in the hotel that's in that transit area. Somebody's paying the hotel bill, paying the food, and I don't know whether it's WikiLeaks or just who is doing that.
Right.
Could there come a time when the bill isn't paid and they kick him out of the hotel? I guess that's possible, but there's just no telling. I think it's going to come down to either Putin saying you're out of here, or one of these countries gives him a refugee travel document to leave. The president of Venezuela was in Moscow at a trade conference, and he was asked, "Is it possible that you could pull your plane up to the transitway and Snowden climb on it, and you could fly him back to Venezuela?"
Yeah.
There's that possibility. I guess that could happen as well.
Oh boy, and the hits just keep on coming from him, unfortunately, because it seems like we're still getting the bleeding of more and more revelations, and countries are ticked at us, even countries like Germany, and then the president the other day, or maybe it was Biden, saying, well, everybody spies on their friends. I mean, it's a pretty bad situation to be put into.
It is, but Mr. Snowden, we need to remember, Mr. Snowden hasn't been convicted. Mr. Snowden is a U.S. citizen charged with U.S. crimes. He's extraterritorial. He's outside the U.S., but the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution still gives him the right to counsel, to U.S. counsel. I'm very surprised that he hasn't lawyered up by now, frankly, with a U.S. lawyer, not a European lawyer,
right,
so that he can be advised, as to what his rights are. But more importantly, frankly, is that once he lawyers up, he's a represented party.
Interesting,
and as a represented party, then the U.S. federal agents are prohibited from interrogating him.
Very, very interesting. The saga continues. Douglas McNabb, international attorney, senior principal at McNabb Associates. I thank you as always, sir.